Welcome, everybody. Today we've got Nick and Matt joining us all the way from across the world. And Nick, Australia, Matt, New Zealand, and we've got Matt's Chane deck that he recently took first at the Road to Nats with. So we're just going to get some insight here, basically the thought process, rationale behind what he's running. And Nick was the brainchild behind the deck. And yeah, just want to hear their insight, because it is a little, you do see some deviations away from what we're kind of seeing stateside. So I'm super interested for the sake of knowing how to play against it. Jason and Blake on the team here are more the Chane players, but just from the outside perspective, it looks different to me. I'm sure it functions quite different. So excited to hear your thoughts on that. But Matt, Nick, by all means, pop in here, introduce yourselves, and then we'll get into the tech.
I'll start. I'm Nick. I'm just one of Matt's friends who I like to share the glory with when I just do nothing. Pretty much, I'm just pretty much a hog, a byproduct of his, which is great. I'm happy with that. Your turn, Matthew.
Yeah. Matthew. Ooh.
Oh God.
I don't know about that, eh? I'm Matt. I like to play decks that Nick comes up with in the shower, and then win events with them. But yeah, no, I played this Chane deck that Nick had the initial idea for, and then we worked on, and to be honest, didn't work very much. It was just kind of the deck was carried by a pretty amazing card that both Nick and I have loved right from Welcome Road. Nick came to me with the idea and sort of said, "Hey, what about if we play Chane, but we put this card in it? And surely this card just does everything that you want him to do." And as soon as we did it and looked at it, it was amazing. It was exactly what the deck wanted to do. So worked out well.
Well, yeah, whoever wants to take point, the brainchild or the pilot, by all means, start walking us through this bad boy here.
All right, I'll start. So I laid it out in a simple way. So the left-hand side are your extenders, is what I'll call them. The middle cards are like your blood deck cards, essentially. And then the right-hand side is the side deck, essentially. And then the bottom cards are just utility cards that are blue block 3s, essentially, just to round out the main deck. So the site, it's super simple. Essentially, I just wanted to play cards that gave go again, or had blood debt, or they kind of synergize with each other. So you'll see cards in other lists that I'm not a fan of, such as Snatch and Razor and Consuming Volition Red and Meet and Greet. And those cards, while they are niche and they have their place against certain matchups, in my head, Chane is the deck to beat, and so I'd rather focus on progressing my own game state than disrupting my opponent's game state with cards like Consuming. So those cards brick you pretty bad because they require too much, and the payoff isn't as good as something like Flock, which is just amazing because it's super efficient. It works great with Nebula Blade on its own, since you can just attack with Nebula Blade for 1 and then come in with a Flock and Arsenal. That's just so good with essentially 2 cards. And then you get to Arsenal 1.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I just want to go again, and it's an attack, so it goes wide. So it just does everything that I want in the deck, and it really helps you get out of the early game, which is the only part of the game that matters to you because of how insanely strong you are in the late game.
Mm-hmm.
That's how the initial idea came to be. And it's also just one of my favorite cards, right? People might not like it at all, but to me, I've always just loved the card because I just love how high of a ceiling it has. The same as cards like Potions, I've always liked, which is why you see more Potions in this deck than you would in any other Chane deck.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's pretty much the rationale of how I came to it. And Matt played the deck, so he'll be able to talk more on it, because I've never actually played the deck before.
I want to... Not to totally interrupt and step in on Matt's toes here, but there was something that we were talking about actually prior to this when we were just, doing our pre-call chat. And I think it's important to bring up here because it's a good segue. So you were talking about how in the States we struggle quite a bit into control decks. At least there's not a prevalence of control outside of like the Katsu, right? And in general, we aren't as patient so far, right? Because we're still developing and we're a bit behind the other side of the world here. But one of the things that you brought up was that a lot of us don't, like, in our decks, in our 80, we're not running cards that play into control very well. We're not building that value. We're not setting up. We're not patiently waiting for those bigger plays to get over the top of a control deck's ability to control. And one of those is potions. Like a lot of our decks, we're not running potions. So I think that just seeing this validation right here of the fact that Chane sides in potions, I'm just assuming, and based on a conversation, that is for like more controlling matchups where you want to set up and build that value. So I feel like I just took all of it, but if you have any other thoughts on it, like would love to hear like what it was that had you settle on this side for like those matchups. And I might be pushing us ahead a little bit, but for control specifically, just because that just popped in my head, I was like, oh dude, this is exactly what we were just talking about. What's your game plan?
Mac can fill it, Angus. He played the deck. It's very simple, which is the beauty of deck building like this.
Yeah. So with this list, it's built to be a 60 card aggressive list for the aggro matchups, and then a 74 card very kind of mid-rangey, go super late, continuously do stuff against control. So against control, pretty simply, you're just playing all of those sideboard cards. So you're playing a full 74 card deck with 6 unhallowed that are constantly putting your 3 Hell from the Beyond and your 2 seeping onto the bottom of your deck. So basically the game plan is to just effectively never run out of gas so that a control deck can never fatigue you. So you know, you're attacking with a few things every turn. Every couple of turns, you'll be playing an unhallowed, popping another howl or whatever onto the bottom, and then because you're barely ever blocking them because they're just trying to fatigue you and they're just blocking with 3, 4, 5 cards a turn. You don't have to block with any of your cards, so you've got a full hand every turn. So you're being able to pitch and play howls and play this, and you know, kind of just go as big as you want to go. So I think that's the really important thing about Flock here as well, is that Flock allows you to kind of, in order to push through these control decks that have all these block 4 defense reacts, and between that and a whole hand can, you know, very easily block up 14 damage a turn if they need to. It can be quite hard to push damage through on a normal turn. So what you really need to be able to do is have big damage push turns. So your normal turn, ideally, you know, you're just coming in for, it can be less than 10 and make them block with 3 cards, and they just have this 1 card left over that they can weapon attack you with or something. Pitch to weapon attack you. So like on your in-between turns, you're happy to just pump out 8 or whatever damage, as long as you're setting up for then the next turn to be pumping out more like 20 damage, you know? So Flock is excellent at that game plan in that you can, you know, attack with Go Again and then finish the end of your chain with a flock of the Featherwalkers, making a Quicken token, revealing a card to put in your arsenal, and then next turn you effectively have a 5-card hand because you're not going to block, plus a Quicken token. So like a 5-card hand and a Time Snap potion. It's almost 6 cards. To attack them on the next turn. So those are your big push turns that really, even if they block with 14, they're taking a bunch of damage.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. So we got, is there any other, I mean, I think the rest of this side, the left side here, your extenders, Nick, I think we've seen the majority of those. Like the plunders don't, you know, that's something that I think maybe has fallen off a bit from initial lists, but like it's not unheard of, right? Like Flock was really intriguing to me. The Mauvrion makes a ton of sense. Is there anything else that you wanted to cover on that left side?
It's just basically just all about consistency, right?
Yep.
That's the point of the deck. Whereas before, decks would either banish too many things or draw too many blood debts. or just have these awkward hands that just didn't do very much. But with this deck, everything has a purpose. There's always something that extends your own game state. I don't want to interrupt my opponent. What they do doesn't matter to me. Because of how high my ceiling is, I don't care what they do. And if they do have something I care about, I always have the Husk, which is just one of the most powerful cards in the deck, because it just completely shuts down any fight that they have or any pushback that they have.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, because Husk is something that you'll see two different camps on, in the States at least, is people love it or people hate playing it. Like I've seen decks where they don't even side it. They don't even have it in their 80. So your quick summary, what's the value of Husk? Why should people be running Husk in their list?
Yeah, it's just to fight off things like Command and Conquer. It just makes that card so much more weak against you. Whereas if you played Aether Ironweave, it's just way more stronger. And then things like Guardian. If Guardian doesn't see Husk, then they can all of a sudden go on an aggressive cross strategy, which you just can't really deal with. Whereas you can shift or completely stop their tempo swing, or pivot turns with just one card, which is why I think if one card in Chane had to get hit, it would be Husk, which would completely change the deck, entirely.
Yeah, I think Husk is really important for the Katsu matchup as well. Like if they set up their big combo turn, you can shut that down without having to lose any cards, so that then you can pivot and straight away do your big combo turn after that as well. It's really important for Dorinthia because like you don't really want to be blocking in that matchup, but Dorinthia is a deck that really punishes you for not blocking, so it allows you to kind of turn one of their turns off at a crucial point so that they're not getting extra counters. And then obviously super important versus Bravo, because otherwise they'll just Spinal Crush and stop you from doing the things that you're doing. Same sort of thing with Prism as well. So that they've got heralds that can stop you from playing things from Banish. So and they've got a herald that can draw 2 cards and allow them to just do a crazy amount of damage to you. So what Husk does is stops that. It's literally it's perfect in most of the matchups. It's exactly what you want.
Nice. All right. Well, I think that hopefully that'll sway some people. Moving on
I'm firmly in the love Husk camp.
Yeah. All right. So then moving on to your middle section, Nick, here, just it looks like it's the core of the blood debt, right? Is there anything that you'd like to touch on as far as decisions you made for including in the 80, things you excluded? It looks pretty standard to me, but I am not like the avid Chane player, so I might be missing something here.
Yeah, Matt probably can talk about the event and like what he liked and maybe what he didn't. But what I didn't like, in theory, because as I said, I didn't play the deck before the event. This is all just in my head. Bounding Demigod's definitely the weakest outside of Red. I don't see the point of ever playing any other version of it, just because of how 1 damage vanilla card is just not good, even if you get it off for free. And it just can get stuck in your banish pile early game. So I didn't want to include the blue one or the yellow one. The red one's obviously good because it meets that threshold of 4, and it turns on all your seeds. So that's the only reason by that one. And the rest, Unhallowed Rites in red, it puts back seed, it puts back that howl. It's also just a powerhouse card, so add only in red. And you only side the blue ones, which we'll get to later. 9 seeds is pretty stable. I don't think anyone's ever ran less than 9, which doesn't.
I was gonna ask. I was like, I've never seen all 9 seeds run. That's crazy.
Yeah. 3 Rip. In retrospect, I don't know if Matt would agree. I'd probably play 2 Rip and 3 Ghostly Visit. I actually really underestimate how good Ghostly Visit actually is. I think that card's really strong. Just because it doesn't require anything, and it costs 1, which is great to reveal a flock in the worst case. And then only 8 Rift Binds, of course, because only they can clog pretty much. And the blue one again, is just a 1 attack thing, and you're not in the early game. That's when you're weakest. So getting that card banished early game is just not great.
Right.
Yeah, I think what's important is that every blood deck card here does something. We're not just playing random cards that you don't want to attack with. You want all of your attacks to sort of be that 4 damage mark that isn't just a 1 card block most of the time. So I think I agree with Nick. I bought it out 1 Rip Through Reality a few times as well. There are a few hedge boards where I wasn't 100% sure how aggressive they were planning to be or how defensive they were planning to be. So I did a few hedge boards where I'd play like 2 Howl from Beyond, 1 Seeping, like 2 Rip, and like a kind of small combination of things. So that I still had enough to outlast the fatigue decks, but then I was still playing all my best cards and being as much of a kind of well-ironed machine against if they went aggro as I could. So yeah, I mean, Ghostly Visit, I think only 1 showing here, but we definitely played 2 in the deck. I think that card could easily be a 3 of. Pretty much exactly as Nick said. It's just it reveals off flock. It's 4 damage. It plays from banish. It's literally everything that you want to be doing.
Yeah.
And then Riftbind it's really important against the control decks that you have a lot of them, so that you you can play around their snags a little bit. Because generally, you need to play a couple of seeds or a couple of non-attack actions, and then play your first Riftbind to bait out the seeds, and then still have 2 Riftbinds, or ideally even 3 Riftbinds for next turn when they don't have a snag, and you just go crazy like that. But at the same time, like they do get a little bit clogged. So I think either 7 or 8 is probably the perfect number on that one. And obviously, seeds you're going to play 9, but yeah, I like the fact that Unhallowed, same sort of thing as Ghostly Visit. It's a 4 attack, does everything you want it to do, but then it also just allows you just amazing inevitability versus the control decks and anything that tries to fatigue you. And then all of your other cards, I mean, Go Again from your Majestic is fantastic. You'd never not play 3 of those. So yeah.
Makes a lot of sense. And then looking down below, you've got your non-blood debt. It looks like is how you separated that out. What made you land on these? Is this is because this is not sided, right? This is a part of the main 60.
Deck.
Yep.
Yeah, as I said, we never played. Everyone has this like assumption that we play 10 hours a day, but we actually never played just because I don't have events or anything, and Matt's busy, and I also get busy. But in theory, Consuming Volition is just a good tech card, because it's a blue and it's just decent against Ninja, which might be troublesome, but it's really not. And that probably can be cut for some other blue that you might like. It's hard to find blue synergistic cards outside of the ones we have already.
Right.
So I just thought, a blue that blocks 3 that has some kind of use at some point maybe could be good. Like Vexing Malice, I think is staple because it turns on Rip Through Realities, and it's still a blue.
Right.
So I wouldn't see any reason to cut that one.
I think what we were looking for is anything blue block 3. We already have some fantastic blues that block 2, but the biggest problem in the deck is so many cards block for 2. So we needed the other blues that we play to block 3, so that you can actually block a little bit in the early game. So in terms of what is out there that is blue, that is block 3, that is not more blood debt that's going to get clogged, these were just kind of the best options. Consuming is just so it's whatever. You barely ever cast it. So as Nick said, if there's another blue block 3 that you like, you can absolutely swap it out for that. That was just one that we thought might be relevant in the harder matchups. And then Vexing's quite nice because in the late game, when you're redrawing your blues, you really a lot of the time you do have 1 or 2 rip through realities and banished, and it's nice to be able to trigger and give those go again so that you can get them out and play them on the hands where you draw like 3 or 4 blues.
Nice. And then moving right along, I know we kind of already covered it, but is there anything you want to hit on specifically in the sideboard that you're like, okay, this matchup is a little harder, this matchup does this to me, so I want to run this? Anything like that? Any thoughts on the sideboard specifically?
Well, Matt played it, so he can comment on that before.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much as I said before. Against the control decks, you're going to want to play like 74 cards. There are some times where you don't want to play Command and Conquer, sometimes it can get a little bit annoying, but it's just so good in the early game when you draw it. Obviously, it's amazing versus Prism because it's a 6 power, but against a lot of decks, it's quite good in the early game because you really want them to be blocking. If your opponent blocks you early and doesn't pressure you early, that means you get to the late game quickly. You know what I mean? Like, that's all you want to do. All you want to do is get to that point where you're banishing 5-6 cards a turn, and then if you get to that point on a reasonable life total, like you're just going to win. Because a deck can't fatigue this. Like, it's pretty much impossible to fatigue with the 6 hallowed. So generally, yeah, you just want to get yourself to that point, and Command does a good job there. So that's the only card that I don't always bring in the control matchups, but most of the time I do anyway. Be careful with Eclipse, I guess, is an important thing. It is not good against aggro decks. I see most Chane players just playing Eclipse in every single matchup. I do think that is a sideboard card. It is very good against control when they're blocking you out. It's amazing. But in the aggro matchups, it's hard to get off. It doesn't block. And then a lot of the time, like, if you take extra blood debt so that you can get to 6 blood debt so that you can make an Ursa, a lot of the time you do that, and then like the Ursa's not even that much better than just the other things you could have been attacking with anyway. It still takes up an action point. It still takes up one of your go agains. Yeah. So in an aggro matchup, when you're actually blocking them and not, generally you want to be playing the stuff out of your banish zone that's costing you blood debt. And attacking with those things. So sometimes you don't even want to attack with the Ursa token, because by attacking for 6 instead of attacking for 4 from your banish zone, you're taking an extra 1 to blood debt anyway, and you might be behind in that game. So that's just not good for you.
No, makes a ton of sense. Makes a ton of sense to me. Any final thoughts, boys? We're coming up on 25 minutes here. Anything else that you wanted to touch on, or that, Matt, something that you saw, or that was just an interesting anecdote from the weekend?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, we're doing something a little bit different to normal Chane decks. We have quite a lot of power in the early game. I mean, there's some interactions like just, in the finals, for example, on turn 2, I just played out a flock, snapped my Snapdragons, played out an E-Strike, attacked for like 17, 18 damage. Like, I think an important thing to note about this Chane deck in comparison to others is you don't have to worry about going too nuts early. You don't have to worry about not using things like Snapdragon and E-Bomb Fold and stuff early, because the more pressure you can put on early, the more likely you're going to be at a good life total and a good point when you get to that 5 or 6 shackle mark. So because you're playing a few more block 2s than a normal Chane deck, and because you're playing a few more aggressive cards, often it's better to not be blocking as much as you normally would in a Chane deck in the early game, and just attack and pressure them and force them to block, because that's, the best defense is a good offense a lot of the time. If you can be forcing them to block, especially with cards like Plunder Run, etc., then your life total is going to stay high, and when you start to get that 5 or 6 shackle turn, you're just going to be unstoppable.
Yeah, I think this deck is just literally just of pure theory. I think there's a lot more you can do with it. Like, you can test the limits to the maximum, and maybe add some defense reacts if you've really like got the list perfectly, done, so you can like get the most damage and beat the control decks with less cards, fit in some defense reacts, and just have a really good aggro matchup. So I think this deck is just not even close to figured out yet, but I think Flocks are put in the right direction. But this is just a good building block deck, right? It's not that expensive for the most part. Like, Flocks are a good replacement. The side deck is just easy because you just put the whole deck in, and then you don't have to think about it. Because people have problems side deck. It's like, what do I really want to put in for this matchup? It's like, just play everything against the control deck. It just is so easy. People overcomplicate things when it's not, doesn't have to be that difficult. From what I've seen, people see the list and they just make these mental gymnastics like it's some kind of advanced quantum physics when it's just I just shove everything into my deck.
Yeah.
Dude, you guys in Australia and New
Just
Zealand,
simple.
just the rocket scientists of the fab world, right? Like we're not even can't even comprehend.
Right. But yeah, I mean, in that same vein, against an aggro deck, like the sideboarding's really easy. You just want a crisp 60 cards. You're not going to be blocking that much, so you don't have to worry about like spending your good cards and stuff, and still being able to have enough for later on or whatever. In a deck like this, you don't really have to worry about that. So you just play your crisp 60. So, the cards on the right-hand side over here are your pure sideboard cards for control.
Mm-hmm.
Against aggro, don't worry about it. Like, just don't play any of those cards. Just play this exact 60 as it is, and it's very easy. It's very easy sideboarding, as Nick said.
Nice. All right. Well, if there are no other thoughts, anything that you guys are promoting or doing right now, any projects in the works that you want to point out or let the world know about?
Well, for me,
I mean, Nick probably wants everybody to get vaccinated so that lockdown finishes in Australia. But yeah, no, I mean, I'm not. I'm just chilling out, playing some Road to Nationals. I think I'm playing 5 Road to Nationals this season, and we're trying to play a different hero at each one to have a bit of fun and have a few things to talk about. So, we've just been having a bit of fun working on some decks there. But yeah,
it's another channel.
Yeah, I was
another
just gonna
competitive
say.
Flesh and Blood channel for our next profile.
What's the
But
next?
make sure you subscribe to Outcast Haven, closing in on 1,000 subscribers.
Yeah, 1,000 subscribers. There we go. We can definitely get there. I'm sure. Subscribe.
Very well deserved. We don't go on. We're not just going to go on any channel. We go on the ones that you should be watching and you should be subscribed to.
Guys, you're making me tear up. It's not because I got such little sleep. It's not that. It's your heartfelt pleas for subscribers. No, super appreciate that. Like we love having you guys on, and just like hearing any sort of insight, from people who've been playing the game the longest is always really it sinks in deeply with us, and I think that a lot of people appreciate hearing that. So thanks for taking the time coming on, and be on the lookout for Matt's upcoming deck techs and possibly some other channels, and have fun with this build. I know that I loved having this conversation because I have a feeling that people are going to be running something along these lines in the future. So knowing what's coming at me, and if you want to spice it up so that you're shaking it up with people that are thinking that this is going to be the deck when they start to see flocks, and then all of a sudden you hit them with I don't even know. I can't even think of what else they'd run, but have fun with it. Let us know in the comments what you think and how it performs for you. And we will talk to you all this Friday. Will be our 52nd podcast as well. So it's just a year on everything all around, and couldn't be more ecstatic for all the support. So peace out, guys.
Bye.